Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you were here with us today. Have you ever noticed how the most frustrating parts of learning anything new, whether it is, a new piece of software, a new sport, or a new language, it is not usually the big, complex concepts that get you.
No, it is usually the little things.
Right. The broad strokes make sense. Instead, it is almost always the tiny, easily forgotten details that completely derail you. And today, well, we are taking a really fascinating look under the hood of the English language.
Oh, yeah. We are getting into the weeds today.
We really are. We are
Right.
specifically focusing on a tricky, often infuriating world of grammar. But we aren't talking about massive vocabulary words or giant paragraphs-long sentence structures.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly. We are looking squarely at the microscopic words, the tiny little connective tissues that hold entire sentences together.
Because it really is the smallest things that cause the biggest headaches, especially for learners. Native speakers use these tiny connective words completely instinctively.
We do not even think about them.
Right. A native speaker doesn't wake up in the morning and consciously think about the spatial relationship between their action and an object.
That sounds exhausting.
It would be. But for anyone trying to learn the language, or honestly, anyone just interested in how human communication actually functions, these little words are a massive stumbling block.
Yeah.
They are the invisible hurdles on the track to fluency. And when you trip over them, it immediately signals to the listener that something in the machinery of the sentence is just broken.
And that machinery is exactly what we are tearing apart today. We have a fantastic source document for you that acts as our roadmap. It is an English learning guide, originally designed for intermediate learners, the B1 level, if you're familiar with the scale.
A really crucial level, by the way.
It is. And it has the absolute best title. It is called The Bad Date and Dependent Prepositions.
Such a great concept.
Right. So the mission of our deep dive today is to explore how this curriculum ingeniously uses the vocabulary of a totally disastrous romantic outing to teach the concept of what it calls sticky verbs.
Sticky verbs. I love that term.
Me too. Sticky verbs and dependent prepositions. We are going to look at how mixing hard language mechanics with highly relatable interpersonal drama.
Because we have all been there.
Oh, absolutely. How it suddenly makes these frustrating, abstract grammar rules just click into place.
The psychological approach here is really what makes this material so compelling to analyze. Normally, a grammar lesson simply hands you a dry, academic list of verbs and their matching prepositions to memorize.
Which is miserable.
It is. And let's be honest, you would forget that list within 5 minutes of walking out of the classroom.
Oh, definitely.
But by grounding the grammar in a high-stakes scenario, a terrible date, we get to see the real-world application. By analyzing the language through this dramatic narrative, you start to see how these tiny prepositions aren't just arbitrary rules invented by some ancient grammarian.
Right. They actually have a purpose.
Exactly. They are the essential gears that make the communication of human emotion actually turn.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the foundation, because before we can even get to the complex grammar rules and these microscopic connective words, our source material establishes a very specific baseline vocabulary.
It sets the stage.
It does. It gives us the words we need to talk about romance and ultimately absolute ruin. It outlines the life cycle of a relationship to give us the building blocks of the story we are about to analyze later on.
Because you really cannot discuss a bad date without the proper terminology.
No, you cannot.
And introducing these verbs first is incredibly strategic because it primes you for a scenario full of friction. The curriculum starts with the idealized state, right? A relationship.
The dream.
The dream. But it immediately pivots to the active verbs that define human interaction under pressure.
Right. It gives us agreeing, which is the harmony part of the relationship.
Yeah.
But that harmony doesn't last long here.
No, it is quickly followed by the verbs complaining and arguing.
Complain and argue.
Yes. Agree, complain, argue. These are highly active, deeply emotional verbs. They establish a semantic field of conflict.
And of course, the ultimate consequence of all this complaining and arguing is introduced right away with a vocabulary term, to break up.
The inevitable conclusion.
So we have the trajectory here. Relationship, agreeing, complaining, arguing, breakup. It is bleak.
Very bleak.
But it is realistic for the story we are building toward. But beyond those standard verbs, there are two very specific dating idioms highlighted here that I want us to really dig into because they carry so much cultural and emotional weight.
Okay, what is the first one?
The first one is a classic nightmare scenario, to stand someone up.
Ouch.
Yeah. The definition provided is simply to not arrive for a date. For example, she stood me up, but there was a massive difference between saying she didn't come and she stood me up.
Oh, there's a monumental difference. The literal phrase, she didn't come to the restaurant, is purely informational. It is emotionally flat.
Right, it is just a fact.
Exactly. It could mean she had a flat tire or a family emergency or she simply forgot. But she stood me up paints an incredibly specific visual and emotional picture.
It really does.
It evokes the image of a person literally left standing alone, waiting, looking foolish, while the other person is entirely deliberately absent.
It implies a breach of a social contract.
Precisely. It implies profound disrespect. The idiom captures the embarrassment, the vulnerability, and the frustration of the situation in a way that the literal translation simply cannot.
That makes a lot of sense.
It transforms a simple physical abscess into a deliberate emotional injury. When you learn that phrase, you aren't just learning vocabulary, you are learning how English speakers conceptualize rejection.
The physical imagery of being left standing is so potent.
It really is.
Now, the second idiom introduced is one that can cause massive anxiety even on a date that is going perfectly well.
Don't be mess. The bill.
You got it. To go Dutch.
Ah, yes.
Going Dutch, the definition is straightforward here. To split the bill, paying 50-50.
It is a crucial piece of cultural and practical vocabulary.
It seems like a simple mathematical concept. But let's pause and think about the human element here, for you listening. Imagine you are out on a date. The chemistry is maybe a little weird, the waiter brings the check, and you have to remember this exact phrase to navigate the financial transaction.
It is a lot of pressure.
It is. Let's say you just say, let's pay 50-50. Why do we even need the phrase, go Dutch? Does it carry a different energy?
That is an excellent question.
Yeah.
Saying let's pay 50-50 is very clinical. It sounds like a business transaction.
Right, like we are buying a lawnmower together or something.
Exactly. Going Dutch softens the negotiation. It is a recognized cultural shorthand. It is a statement of modern equality, sure, but depending entirely on the context and the tone of voice, it could also be a subtle signal that the date isn't going to end romantically.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if one person assumed they were being treated and the other person suddenly says, let's go Dutch, the entire energy of the evening shifts.
The romance is dead.
By putting this idiom right at the beginning of the material, the lesson is signaling that the words we use have profound social consequences.
It really is a minefield. So trying to navigate the already terrifying landscape of a romantic relationship, trying to figure out if you are arguing, complaining, breaking up, or going Dutch is hard enough.
It is a full-time job.
But doing all of that while simultaneously trying to remember the specific tiny grammar rules that attach to these words, that is the real challenge. And that is exactly where we move next. We transition from the emotional vocabulary of dating into the hard structural grammar of the English language. This brings us to the core concept. What are described here as sticky verbs?
Sticky verbs is a wonderful pedagogical tool.
It is a great image.
It instantly gives you a visual metaphor for how the syntax operates. These verbs are sticky because they absolutely need a partner word to function correctly, and that partner word is always a preposition. A sticky verb cannot stand alone with a direct object. It simply doesn't work grammatically. The verb has to stick to a preposition, and then that preposition connects to the object.
Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this before we look at the specific examples. When you say cannot stand alone with an object, you mean the verb can't just crash directly into the noun.
Right.
There has to be a buffer.
That is a great way to put it. Yes, a buffer or a bridge. The curriculum focuses heavily on what it calls the big three mistakes.
The big three.
These are the foundational sticky verbs that trip up almost every person trying to master English.
Let's tackle mistake number one. The verb is look. And the mandatory rule is that you must use the preposition at. The correct example provided is, look at me.
Look at me.
And to illustrate why this is so critical, there's a strict negative warning. Never say, look at me.
Ever.
Look me. If I hear someone say that, it doesn't just sound like a slight accent or a minor slip-up. It sounds fundamentally broken, almost like caveman speak. Why does omitting that one tiny two-letter word destroy the entire sentence?
It destroys it because omitting the word at completely breaks the underlying physics of the phrase.
The physics.
Yes. This gets into the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs.
Wait, let me pause you right there. Transitive and intransitive. For those of us who haven't been in a formal grammar class in a decade or two, can you give us the plain English breakdown of what that actually means?
Absolutely. Think of a transitive verb as an action that you do directly to something else.
Okay.
If I say I throw the ball, the action of throwing transfers directly from me to the ball. The ball receives the action. That is transitive.
It transitions over to the object.
Exactly. Now, an intransitive verb is an action that does not transfer directly to an object. If I say I sleep, I am just doing the action. I cannot sleep a bed.
Got it. You can't verb the bed.
Exactly. You cannot verb the bed. So, applying this to our sticky verb, when you use the verb look in this context, it is intransitive. The action of looking requires a direction, a target, but it cannot directly manipulate the object.
Right.
The preposition at acts as a targeting laser.
Ooh, I like that. A targeting laser.
It directs your vision toward the object, which in the example is me. Without the at, the verb look crashes directly into the pronoun me with no structural support. You are trying to directly action the person with your eyes, which makes no sense structurally.
Right, like your eyes are physically grabbing them.
Exactly. It is like trying to build a bridge between two cliffs without any steel beams. The sentence simply collapses into look me.
A targeting laser. That makes total sense. The preposition is aiming your verb. So if look is the first major trap, what is catching people next? I imagine the act of waiting for someone on a date brings up its own grammar nightmare.
Oh, it certainly does.
And that is exactly mistake number 2 for the big 3. The verb is wait. And the mandatory sticky partner is FOR. We get the classic everyday example. I wait for the bus.
This is a massive stumbling block, and it is entirely predictable based on how other languages operate. The text notes that learners constantly want to say, I wait the bus.
I hear that constantly. I wait, my friend, or I'm waiting the train.
Yeah.
Why is it that so many different people, coming from entirely different native languages, all make this exact same mistake in English?
Because in many other languages, the equivalent of the verb wait is actually a transitive verb.
Like throwing the ball.
Exactly. Remember our throwing the ball example. In those languages, you can directly act upon the object you are anticipating. You can literally wait the bus. But English philosophy regarding this action is entirely different.
English philosophy.
Yes, in English, wait is a state of being. You are existing in a state of anticipation. You cannot apply the physical action of waiting directly onto the heavy metal object of the bus.
So you're saying that in English, waiting is something happening internally to me, not something I am doing to the bus.
Precisely. The preposition for is required to establish the reason for your state of anticipation. The word for creates the necessary relationship between your internal state of waiting and the external reality of the arriving vehicle. Without for, you are trying to verb the bus itself. You are stripping away the context and just crashing an internal state into a physical object.
You are existing in a state of waiting. I really want that to sink in for a second for you listening. We don't often think about the philosophical implications of our grammar. These tiny words literally define the physics and the boundaries of the sentence.
They map out reality.
Okay, let's hit the final one of the big 3. Mistake number 3. The verb is listen, and its permanent sticky partner is TO. The example is, I listen to the radio. And again, the strict rule, you must never say, I listen the radio.
Never. And the reasoning here builds beautifully on what we just discussed with look at. The preposition to acts as a necessary bridge between the action and the source.
Let me guess. Is this the difference between hearing and listening?
Yes.
Because I can hear a loud noise without trying. I don't hear a noise.
You have hit the nail on the head. Here is the passive reception of sound. It happens to you whether you want it to or not. But listening is not passive.
It is active.
Listening is the active, conscious directing of your auditory attention toward a specific source. The preposition to indicates that directional flow. You are pointing your attention to the radio.
Okay.
If you say, I listen the radio, you are stripping away the directionality of the action. You are implying a physical impossibility, as if the radio itself is a direct object being manipulated by the act of listening rather than the source you are tuning into.
Okay, so we have the foundational big 3 securely in place. Look at the targeting laser. Wait for the reason. Listen to the directional flow.
Very well summarized.
These are the bedrock rules. If you get these wrong, people will probably still understand what you mean, but your English will immediately sound jagged, unnatural, and disconnected. But the material doesn't stop with the basics. It levels up into what it considers more advanced sticky pairs.
Yes, these involve a slightly higher level of abstract thinking.
The transition from the foundational verbs to the advanced pairs is where the language gets really nuanced. The first advanced pairing introduced is the verb depend sticking to the preposition on and in. We are given a very conversational example, the kind of casual exchange you might have every single day of your life.
Right.
One person asks, "Do you want to go out tonight?" And the response is, "It depends on the weather."
Now, this is where a massive translation trap occurs. It is noted as a top mistake specifically for speakers of Romance languages and Germanic languages, specifically Spanish, French, and German.
Let's unpack that. Why those languages specifically? What is their instinct when they hear depend on?
Speakers of these languages instinctively try to map their native grammatical structures directly onto English vocabulary. And in those languages, the grammatical structure for this concept often relies on the equivalent of the English preposition of.
Oh,
Yes, so their brains automatically generate the phrase, depends of. It depends of the weather.
as a native English speaker, hearing depends of Mac instantly triggers a tiny alarm bell in my brain.
Oh, absolutely.
It signals that something is slightly off balance, even though I perfectly understand the meaning. Why is depends so fundamentally wrong in English? What is the word on doing that of can't do?
It comes down to the underlying metaphor that English uses for the concept of reliance. In English, depends implies a metaphorical weight.
Metaphorical weight.
Yes, think about the physical world. If a heavy building depends on its concrete foundation, the building is physically resting on it. The gravity is pushing down on it.
Okay, I see.
English takes that spatial preposition on and uses it to represent metaphorical reliance. The entire outcome of your evening, whether you go out or stay home, is resting securely on the condition of the weather.
I really like that visual. The evening rests on the weather.
Conversely, the preposition of English usually implies origin, possession, or composition. A glass of water or the King of England. It doesn't fit the metaphor of physical weight and reliance.
No, it doesn't at all.
This is why the instruction here is a strict drill. It must be on-en, on-en, on-en. You have to consciously overwrite the instinct of your native tongue with the special metaphor of the English language.
That makes total sense. You're supporting the verb with a physical surface.
Let's look at the second advanced pairing. It is the verb belong paired with the preposition to. The example is simple. This phone belongs to me.
The meaning is straightforward. It simply means it is mine. But grammatically, it is doing something very interesting with the concept of ownership, and it contrasts sharply with simply using a possessive pronoun.
Right, because I could easily just hold up the device and say, this is my phone. That conveys the exact same information. So why do we need belongs to? Does it change the emotional tone?
It absolutely changes the focus and the tone. When you say, this is my phone, that is a simple statement of fact. The subject is this. But using the sticky verb belong to shifts the grammatical focus entirely onto the object itself.
The phone.
Yes, it makes the phone the subject of the sentence, and the verb belong describes the phone's relationship to you.
It almost personifies the object. It does. And the preposition to acts as a tether.
A tether.
Imagine an invisible string tying the physical object directly to its rightful owner. The phrase belongs to me emphasizes the connection, the legal, moral, or personal tie between the human and the object, in a way that my phone does not. It is a much stronger assertion of a relationship.
So we've got our baseline dating vocabulary of conflict. We've mastered our big three sticky verbs, look at T, wait for alar, listen T. And we've tackled our advanced metaphorical pairings, depend on, belong to.
We have covered a lot of ground.
Now here's where this curriculum does something truly brilliant. It doesn't just leave these words floating in a disconnected list for you to memorize. It takes all of this grammar, all of this emotional vocabulary, and it violently smashes them together into a single narrative framework.
This is the centerpiece of the entire lesson. A short story titled, appropriately, The Bad Date.
The instructions for this story are very specific. It is meant to be read very slowly, encouraging the listener to actively pause and write down the prepositions as they hear them. It is not just a story, it is a diagnostic test.
It is an exercise in active listening. By forcing the learner to pause and physically write, it prevents them from just passively letting the narrative wash over them.
Right, you can't zone out.
Exactly. They have to actively hunt for the grammatical structures hidden within the tension of the story.
So let's do exactly that. Let's reconstruct this disastrous timeline, sentence by sentence, and actively analyze the grammar mechanics at play. The story introduces us to two characters, Lukas and Sarah, and right from the very first sentence, the grammar sets the physical scene. It begins with, Lukas arrives at the restaurant.
Now, we will actually come back to the specific geography of arrive at later because there is a whole separate section dedicated just to the nuances of that verb.
Oh yes, we will get to that.
For now, the scene is set. Lukas is at the restaurant. He is physically present. And then we immediately hit our first major sticky verb, The text says, he waits for Sarah.
There it is.
Hmm.
Mistake number 2 from our big 3, used correctly in context. Lucas is sitting there, existing in a state of anticipation.
Waiting for the bus. Or in this case, Sarah.
Exactly. The preposition for when connects his waiting to the target reason, which is Sarah. He's not waiting Sarah. He is waiting for Sarah.
And what does a human being naturally do when they are stuck in a state of anticipation for someone who isn't showing up?
They check the time.
Right. The next sentence tells us he looks at his watch.
The targeting laser. Mistake number 1 successfully avoided. The laser pointer of his vision is directed by the word at directly onto the face of the watch. He looks at his watch, not he looks his watch.
And the very next sentence delivers the inevitable bad news. She is late.
So immediately the tension is established. We have the physical setting, the internal state of waiting, the active checking of time, and the failure of the other party to uphold their end of the social contract.
He is getting stood up.
Almost. Lucas is now stuck. He is trapped in this location. And the narrative describes the atmosphere he is trapped in by deploying our final big 3 verb. He listens to the bad music in the restaurant.
Notice how rapidly these verbs are stacking up. In just 4 sentences, the learner has had to actively identify and process wait for, look at, and listen to.
It is a gauntlet.
But look at what the grammar is doing to the mood of the story. By adding the specific detail of the bad music, the story compounds Lucas's misery. His active auditory attention, the directional flow we talked about, is being forced towards something highly unpleasant while he waits.
It is a deeply relatable scenario. Lucas is waiting for Sarah, looking at his watch, forcibly listening to bad music. The guy is suffering. And then, finally, the turning point. The text says, finally, Sarah arrives.
You would think the tension would break here, but a completely new conflict immediately begins.
Because the very next sentence perfectly defines Sarah's attitude, and it does so using another dependent preposition. The story notes, she does not apologize for being late.
This is a fantastic inclusion. It is a dependent preposition that wasn't explicitly listed in the earlier Big 3 section, but it follows the exact same logical architecture.
Apologize for.
Yes. The verb apologize requires the preposition for to connect the expression of regret to the specific action or event that caused the offense.
So you can't just apologize being late. You have to build the bridge.
Exactly. She doesn't just withhold a general apology. She specifically severs the grammatical connection to her lateness. She does not apologize for it.
The author is painting a very clear, very unlikable picture of Sarah here.
Very quickly, too.
And it gets worse rapidly. The story continues to stack these negative behaviors using our sticky prepositions. The text says, she talks about her ex-boyfriend all night.
Another sticky pair. You don't talk your ex-boyfriend. That would be nonsense.
Total nonsense.
The preposition about surrounds the topic. It indicates that her ex-boyfriend is the entire subject matter, the circumference of her speech. And from a pure narrative perspective, talking about an ex on a first date is the ultimate faux pas.
It is the worst thing you can do.
The language mechanics are directly serving the emotional disaster of the story.
It is an absolute train wreck. But she doesn't stop with the ex-boyfriend. The next sentence loops back to our baseline vocabulary. She complains about the food.
Here, we see one of those core conflict words from the very beginning of the lesson, complain, put into action with its dependent preposition. Again, about is used to encircle the topic of her grievance.
So imagine you are Lucas. You have been waiting. You have been listening to terrible music. Your date finally arrives with no apology, talks incessantly about her ex, and is now complaining about the meal. What is your internal state?
I would be looking for the exit.
Exactly. The text perfectly captures his desperation with the next sentence. Lucas thinks about going home.
Notice the deliberate repetition of the preposition about.
Oh, I see that.
She talks about her ex, she complains about the food, he thinks about escaping. The grammar is creating a rhythmic drumbeat of discontent.
And then we reach the absolute climax of the story, the moment of truth on any bad date. The arrival of the bill. The text sets the scene. The waiter asks, who will pay?
This is the catalyst. This is where all the tension, the waiting, the bad music, the lack of an apology, the ex-boyfriend, the complaints finally boils over.
I want to recount this finale exactly because the dialogue is so satisfying and it perfectly deploys the advanced grammar we learned.
Go for it.
The waiter asks, who will pay? Lucas, who has endured this nightmare, finally snaps. The text says, Lucas says, it depends on her.
A masterful deployment of the advanced sticky verb. Think back to the metaphor of physical weight we discussed.
The concrete foundation.
Yes. Lucas is taking the entire financial responsibility of this disastrous evening and placing it so it rests heavily firmly on Sarah. He's using the grammar to draw an absolute boundary.
He is saying, I am not carrying this weight. But Sarah, completely lacking in self-awareness, fires right back. The story concludes with her vicious retort. Sarah says, this bill belongs to you, Lucas.
Wow. And there is our final advanced prepositional pairing. She is rejecting the weight.
She throws it right back.
She is using the invisible tether of the word to legally, personally, and aggressively attach the physical object of the restaurant bill directly to Lucas.
It is such a dramatic, cinematic ending to the scene. I mean, I can picture them glaring at each other across the table.
If we synthesize what the creator of this curriculum has done, it really is a masterclass in contextual learning. They have taken these dry, abstract grammatical rules, these tiny prepositions that are notoriously hard for learners to retain, and embedded them deep within a high-stakes emotional scenario.
Humans love drama.
We do. Human beings are hardwired to remember stories, especially stories involving social conflict and injustice. By tying the grammar to the conflict, you are forced to remember the pairing.
You don't just remember that depend takes on. You remember Lucas's righteous anger.
Right. And you don't just remember that belong takes to. You remember Sarah's absolute audacity shoving that bill across the table. The visceral emotion anchors the grammar permanently in your memory.
You will certainly never forget belongs to you after picturing that scene. Okay, so the story is over. The date has spectacularly crashed and burned, but our deep dive is not quite finished.
Not yet.
After the narrative, the material transitions to a specific geographic nuance that we briefly touched upon at the very first sentence of the story. The absolute dilemma of how exactly to arrive.
Yes. This advanced section addresses a very specific spatial and geographical problem in the English language. When you are moving toward a destination, how do you grammatically enter it when the journey is over?
It frames it around a very simple conceptual divide. Big places versus small places.
It is a brilliant way to simplify a rule that often causes immense confusion. The rule is that you use arrive in when you are talking about a city, a state, or a country. A massive geographic area with borders. The example provided is, I arrived in London.
So London is a big place, a sprawling, massive metropolis. You arrive in it.
Think deeply about what the preposition in actually signifies. It suggests being surrounded by something, being enclosed within its borders, being submerged in it.
You are inside the boundary.
When you arrive in a city or a country, you have crossed a threshold and are now contained within that vast space. It is a macroscopic view of arrival.
That makes perfect sense. I am in the country. But then, the lesson contrasts this with the other option, arrive AT. And the rule here is that you use AT for a specific building, a specific address, or a highly localized place, a much smaller point on the map.
Like a restaurant.
Exactly. The examples given are, I arrived at the airport, or I arrived at the hotel.
Which perfectly explains the grammar of the very first sentence of our bad date story. The text explicitly stated, Lucas arrives at the restaurant.
Because the restaurant is a specific building. It is not a sprawling metropolis. It is a small place.
Exactly. The preposition at functions like a precise pinpoint on a GPS map. It doesn't imply being engulfed by the space in the way in does. It merely designates a specific set of coordinates. You have navigated to this precise location.
You are at the restaurant. You are at the airport.
It is a microscopic view of arrival. The contrast between the microscopic enveloping in and the microscopic precise at is a vital distinction for painting an accurate spatial picture.
Let me test this to make sure I really grasp the boundary. Let's say I am traveling to Paris to go to the Louvre Museum. I would say I arrived in Paris, and then I arrived at the Louvre.
Perfectly executed. You crossed the macroscopic border of Paris and then navigated to the microscopic pinpoint of the museum.
Excellent. Now, just to ensure there is absolutely no confusion, the material delivers what I like to call the ultimate sin of this particular verb.
The ultimate sin.
It gives a final, explicit, almost aggressive warning on the topic of arriving. It says you must never, under any circumstances, say, arrive to.
This is a fascinating prohibition, and we really need to explore why learners make this specific mistake so frequently, because the logic behind the mistake is actually quite sound.
I agree. It makes total sense if you don't know the rule.
In English, we use go to, we use travel to, we use drive to, we use fly to. The preposition to is deeply and inextricably associated with movement toward a destination. So logically, a learner assumes you should arrive to a destination.
Right. I mean, if I'm going to the store and driving to the store, why wouldn't I arrive to the store? The logic tracks perfectly. Why does English reject it?
Because the verb arrive doesn't describe the movement, it describes the completion of the movement.
The completion.
The journey is over. The state of motion has ended, and a state of static presence has begun. Therefore, the preposition of movement to is no longer applicable. Your motion is finished. You need prepositions of location in for borders, for points.
Wow. Okay, that is profound.
Saying arrive to creates a literal grammatical paradox. It combines a verb of completion and stillness with a preposition of ongoing forward motion.
That is wild.
The English language structurally rejects that paradox, which is why the rule is so strict. Never say arrive to.
That distinction between the journey and the completion of the journey is such a powerful way to understand why the rule exists. It is not just a random law invented to make tests harder. It is based on the literal physics of the action.
It truly is.
Okay, we have covered so much ground today. We've learned the emotional vocabulary of dating, mastered the physics of the big three sticky verbs, survived the worst date in recorded history with Lukas and Sarah, and finally figured out how to arrive at a building without creating a grammatical paradox.
It has been a full day.
To wrap all of this up, the source document concludes with an interactive finale.
A practical application of everything we have unpacked.
It outlines a game called The Missing Link, designed to test the learner under pressure. I think this is a fantastic way for you, listening to us right now, to test your own memory and see if you have truly internalized the mechanics we've been discussing.
It forces rapid recall, which is exactly the skill you need in a real-world fluid conversation. You don't have time to map out transitive and intransitive verbs when you're actually talking to someone.
You just have to know it. So let's run the rounds exactly as they are laid out in the challenge. We're going to playfully role-play the provided examples, and I want you to try to shout out the answer in your head before we give it away. Here we go. Round 1. The prompt is, please listen blank me.
And the correct shouted response is, of course, listen to me.
Because listen is our active conscious verb, and to is the directional flow of the sound. Nailed it. Moving on to round 2, the prompt is, I am waiting blank, my friend.
The required answer, waiting for my friend.
Because waiting is an internal state of being, and for connects that state to the reason, the friend. You cannot verb your friend. Excellent. Round 3, getting into the advanced metaphorical wait. It depends blank the price.
The answer must be, it depends on the price.
On. We absolutely do not say depends of no matter what our instincts tell us. The weight of the financial decision rests firmly on the surface of the price. Okay, you are doing great if you are playing along. But the curriculum throws a curveball at the very end. Round 4 is explicitly labeled as the trap. Are you ready for it? The prompt is, look blank the sky. Let me pause before you answer. What is the instinct here?
Well, the standard answer, based on the Big Three foundation we built earlier, is look at the sky. The laser pointer of your vision is directed squarely at the sky.
But the text provides a very subtle nuance here. It notes that look UP is also technically acceptable in this specific context. Why does up work when we spend all that time saying it has to be at?
It is acceptable because up is functioning differently grammatically. It is functioning as an adverb of direction rather than a dependent preposition attaching to an object in that specific phrasing. You are directing your gaze upward.
Oh.
However, the lesson smartly clarifies that while look up works directionally, 8T remains the standard foundational sticky preposition being taught for the verb look when attaching it to an object. So look at the sky is the safest and most grammatically consistent answer for someone trying to master the core rule.
It reinforces the habit.
Right. You look at the sky, you look at your watch, you look at me.
It is always good to know the exceptions and the nuances, but stick to the bedrock rules until you are a master. Look at the sky. And with that final trap successfully avoided, we have completely navigated the entire curriculum.
We made it through.
Let's take a moment to summarize this journey we have been on today. We started by exploring the fundamental concept of sticky verbs, the idea that some actions absolutely require a tiny partner word, a buffer, to function correctly. We learned the hard physics behind why you must look at, wait for, and listen to.
We also tackled the dangerous translation traps of advanced pairs, learning that in English, metaphorical weight means things depend on situations, and the invisible tether of ownership means objects belong to people.
We then took all of these abstract linguistic rules and tested them in the crucible of real-world human drama, navigating the incredibly treacherous waters of a terrible date. We watched Lukas and Sarah's brief relationship completely crumble beneath the weight of withheld apologies, complaints, bad music, and a fiercely disputed restaurant bill.
A truly bad date.
And we analyze the grammatical connective tissue of every single sentence of their misery.
And finally, we mastered the subtle but vital geographical differences between arriving in the massive borders of a city and arriving at the specific pinpoint of a building, completely banishing the paradoxical phrase arrive to from our vocabularies forever.
It has been a lot of information to process, but I hope you are starting to see these tiny microscopic words in a whole new light. They aren't just filler.
I think the real value for you as a listener, whether you're actively studying English or just fascinated by how communication works, is recognizing that language isn't just about memorizing massive, impressive vocabulary words or perfectly conjugating complex verb tenses.
No, it is not.
True fluency, true understanding, is found in the connective tissue. It is about these tiny prepositions, the fors, the tos, the ons, the ats, the abouts. These microscopic words are the hidden structural architecture of the sentence. They dictate the physics.
The physics of the
They
sentence.
give your words precise meaning, directional flow, and spatial logic. Without them, your impressive vocabulary is just a scattered pile of bricks. The prepositions are the mortar that actually builds the house.
The mortar that builds the house.
Yeah.
That is beautifully summarized. And it brings me to a final provocative thought that I want to leave you with today. We've spent this entire time looking at how a missing or incorrect preposition breaks the syntax of a sentence. But I want you to ponder something deeper about the human experience.
Okay.
If prepositions are the essential glue that holds English communication together, how many real-life arguments, how many deeply hurt feelings, how many terrible dates, just like Lucas and Sarah's, are actually caused not by malice, not by genuine incompatibility, but by a simple, microscopic, missing word in translation?
It is a profound question to consider. How often do we judge someone's tone, their respect for us, or their ultimate intention based on a tiny structural error they didn't even realize they made? We assume they are being rude, when really they just dropped an at or used an of instead of an on.
Exactly. It completely changes the tone without them knowing. Something to think about the next time you're trying to communicate, especially across a language barrier.
Yeah.
Have a little patience, look for the missing link, try not to complain about the food, and never ever say arrive to. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.